Hmm.
Oh, wow.
Okay, there we are on
But
live stream.
apparently nobody went near any bookshop. So there was lots of looting, but nobody went near
All
any
right.
bookshop.
Was it
Runners,
was it because of lack of culture, or was it out of respect for the books?
that's a good point.
Hmm. But I have to say, I spent a week in Dublin last summer. I didn't go abroad this summer, and I have to say it was an absolutely fabulous time. Apart from the
I
cost of
love Dublin.
accommodation, yeah, I loved it. It was great. I
I
saw
love
one I saw one incident that was potentially violent, and that was relatively
Dublin.
minor.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, that's good. And hopefully,
That's good.
hopefully the what happened last week will not be repeated anytime soon.
Hopefully, Duncan.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Okay, let me say a little thing here. We're continuing our reading of the Ithaca section of Ulysses. And I will put a key phrase up in the description of the video if anybody watching wants to read along with us. And with that, I will begin reading. Did he see only a second coincidence in the second scene narrated to him, described by the narrator as a Pisgah site of Palestine, or the parable of the Plums? It, with the preceding scene and with others unnarrated but existent by implication, to which add essays on various subjects or moral aphogens, e.g., My Favorite Hero or Procrastination of the Thief of Time, composed during school years, seemed to him to contain in itself and in conjunction with the personal equation certain possibilities of financial, social, personal, and sexual success. Whether specially collected or selected as model pedagogic names of cent per cent merit for the use of preparatory and junior grade students, or contributed in print form, following the precedent of Philip Beaufort, or Dr. Dick or Heblin's Studies in Blue, to a publication of certified circulation and solvency, or employed verbally as intellectually stimulation for sympathetic auditors, tacitly appreciative of successful narrative and confidently augurative of successful achievement. During the increasingly longer nights gradually following the summer solstice on the day but three following the distillate, Tuesday, 21st June, St. Aloysius Gonzaga, sunrise, 3:33 a.m., sunset, 8:29 p.m. Next, please.
What had been his hypothetical singular solutions? Parlor games, dominoes, Halma, tiddlywinks, spillikins, cup and ball, nap, spoil 5, bezique, 25, beggar my neighbor, draughts, or drafts, I should say, chess, or backgammon, embroidery, darning or knitting for the police aided clothing society, musical duets, mandolin and guitar, piano and flute, guitar and piano, legal scrivenery or envelope addressing, biweekly visits to variety entertainments, commercial activity as pleasantly commanding and pleasingly obeyed mistress proprietress in a cool dairy shop or warm cigar divan, the clandestine satisfaction of erotic irritation in masculine brothels, state inspected and medically controlled, social visits at regular infrequent prevented intervals and with regular frequent preventive superintendents, to and from female acquaintances of recognized respectability in the vicinity, courses of evening instruction specially designed to render liberal instruction agreeable. What instances of deficient mental development in his wife inclined him in favor of the last mentioned, ninth solution? In disoccupied moments, she had more than once covered a sheet of paper with signs and hieroglyphics, which she stated were Greek and Irish and Hebrew characters. She had interrogated constantly at varying intervals as to the correct method of writing the capital initial of the name of a city in Canada, Quebec. She understood little of political complications, internal or balance of power, external. In calculating the addenda of bills, she frequently had recourse to digital aid. After completion of laconic epistolary compositions, she abandoned the implement of calligraphy in the encaustic pigment exposed to the corrosive action of copperas, green vitriol, and nutgall. Unusual polysyllables of foreign origin she interpreted phonetically, or by false analogy, or by both. Metempsychosis, metempsychosis, alias, a mendacious person mentioned in sacred scripture. Next, please.
What compensated in the false balance of her intelligence for these and such deficiencies of judgment regarding persons, places, and things? The false apparent parallelism of all perpendicular arms of all balances proved true by construction. The counterbalance of her proficiency of judgment regarding one person proved true by experiment. How had he attempted to remedy this state of comparative ignorance? Variously, by leaving in a conspicuous place a certain book open at a certain page, by assuming in her, when alluding explanatorily, latent knowledge, by open ridicule of her presence, of some absent others' ignorant lapse. With what success had he attempted direct instruction? She followed not all, a part of the whole, gave attention with interest, comprehended with surprise, with care repeated, with great difficulty remembered, forgot with ease, with misgiving re-remembered, re-repeated with error. What system had proved more effective? Indirect suggestion implicating self-interest. Example, she disliked umbrella with rain. He liked woman with umbrella. She disliked new hat with rain. He liked woman with new hat. He bought new hat with rain. She carried umbrella with new hat. Next, please.
Accepting the analogy implied in his guest's parable, which examples of post-stylistic eminence did he adduce? Three seekers of the pure truth: Moses of Egypt, Moses Maimonides, author of More Nebuchadnezzar, Guide of the Perplexed, and Moses Mendelis Sunim, of such eminence that from Moses of Egypt to Moses Mendelis there arose none like Moses Maimonides. What statement was made under correction by Bloom concerning a fourth seeker of pure truth? By name, Aristotle mentioned, with permission by Stephen, that the seeker mentioned had been a pupil of a rabbinical philosopher named Uncertain. Were other anaprypical illustrations sons of the law and children of a selected or rejected race mentioned? Felix Bartholdi, Mendelssohn, composer, Baruch, Spinoza, philosopher, Mendoza, pugilist, Ferdinand Lassalle, reformer dualist. What fragments of verse from the ancient Hebrew and ancient Irish languages were cited with modulations of voice and translation of text by guest to host and by host to guest? By Stephen Schuler, Schuil go sucker August Schuil go cune. Walk, walk, walk your way, walk in safety, walk with care. By Bloom, Kifilog, Karimon, Racket Jack, Mabod, Lad Sam Atex. Thy temple amid thy hair is as a slice of pomegranate. I know. How was a glyphic comparison of phonic symbols of both language made in substantiation of the oral comparison? On the penultimate blank page of a book of inferior literary style. Did I miss something?
No, I've got to do a little mute thing.
Is there any way to get one?
Okay, on the penultimate blank page of a book of inferior literary style entitled Sweets of Sin, produced by Bloom and so manipulated that its front cover came in contact with the surface of the table, with a pencil supplied by Stephen. Stephen wrote the Irish characters for G-E-D-E, simple and modified, and Bloom in turn wrote the Hebrew characters, Mimel, Alved, Dele, and in the absence of Mem, a substituted group, explaining their arithmetical values as ordinal and cardinal numbers by the letters 3, 1, 4, and 100. Next, please.
Was the knowledge possessed by both of each of these languages, the extinct and the revived, theoretical or practical? Theoretical being confined to certain grammatical rules of accidence and syntax, and practically excluding vocabulary. What points of contact existed between these languages and between the peoples who spoke them? The presence of guttural sounds, diacritic aspirations, epenthetic and servile letters in both languages, their antiquity, both having been taught on the plain of Shinar 242 years after the deluge in the seminary instituted by Phineas Farsag, descendant of Noah, progenitor of Israel, and descendant of Heber and Heremon, progenitors of Ireland. Their archaeological, genealogical, hagiographical, exegetical, homiletic, toponomastic, historical, and religious literatures comprising the works of rabbis and Chaldees, Torah, Talmud, Mishnah, and Gemara, Masor, Pentateuch, Book of the Dun Cow, Book of Ballymote, Garland of Hoth, Book of Kells, their dispersal, persecution, survival, and revival, the isolation of their synagogical and ecclesiastical rites in Ghetto, St. Mary's Abbey, and Mass House, Adam and Eve's Tavern, the proscription of their national costumes in penal laws and Jewish dress acts, the restoration in Shannon David of Zion, and the possibility of Irish political autonomy or devolution. Next, please.
What anthem did Bloom chant partially in anticipation of that multiple, ethnically irreducible consummation? Kolod Balajwa Nima Nefesh Yehudi Hamyab. Why was the chant arrested at the conclusion of this first distich? In consequence of defective mnemotechnic. How did the chanter compensate for this deficiency? By a paraphrastic version of the general text. In what common study did their mutual reflections merge? The increasing simplification traceable from the Greek epigraphic hieroglyphs to the Greek and Roman alphabets, and the anticipation of modern stenography and telegraphic code in the cuneiform inscription Semitic and the virgular quinquo costet oham writing, Celtic. Did the guest comply with his host's request? Doubly, by appending his signature in Irish and Roman characters. What was Stephen's auditive sensation? He heard in a profound, ancient male, unfamiliar melody the accumulation of the past. And what was Bloom's visual sensation? He saw in a quick young male, familiar form, predestination of a future. What were Stephen's and Bloom's quasi-simultaneous volitional quasi-sensations of concealed identities? Visually, Stephen's, the traditional figure of hypostasis, depicted by Johannes Damascenus, Lentulus Romanus, and Epiphanius Monachus, as lusodermic, sesquipedalian, with wine dark hair. Auditively, Bloom's, the traditional accent of the ecstasy of catastrophe. Next.
What future careers had been possible for Bloom in the past, and with what exemplars? In the Church of Rome, Anglican or Nonconformist exemplars the Very Reverend John Conmey, S.J., the Reverend T. Salmon, D.D., Provost of Trinity College, Dr. Alexander J. Dewey. At the bar, English or Irish exemplars Seymour Bushe, K.C., Rufus Isaac, K.C. On the stage, modern or Shakespearean exemplars Charles Wyndham, High Comedian Osmond Till, exponent of Shakespeare. Did the host encourage his guest to chant in modulated voice a strained legend on an Aeolide theme? Reassuringly, their plays where none could hear them talk being secluded, reassured the decoated beverages, allowing for sub-solid residual sediment of a mechanical mixture, water plus sugar plus cream plus cocoa having been consumed. Recite the first major part of this chanted legend. Little Harry Hughes and his schoolfellows all went out for to play ball, and the very first ball little Harry Hughes played, he drove it o'er the Jew's garden wall, and the very second ball little Harry played, he broke the Jew's windows all. How did the son of Rudolph receive the first part? With unmixed feeling, smiling, a Jew, he heard with pleasure and saw the unbroken kitchen window recite the second part, minor, of the legend. Then out came the Jew's daughter, and she all dressed in green. Come back, you pretty little boy, and play your ball again. I can't come back, I won't come back without my schoolfellows all, for if my master he did bear, he'd make me eat a sorry ball. She took him by the lily-white hand and led him along the hall until she led him to a room where none could hear him call. She took a penknife out of her pocket and cut off his little head, and now he'll play his ball no more, for he lies among the dead. Next, please.
Okay, so Sylvia, do you have the place? You'll have to unmute yourself. There you
Can
go.
you hear me? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
yeah, just fine.
Because I'm. How did the father of Millicent receive the second part with mixed feelings? On smiling, he heard and saw with wonder a Jew's daughter, all dressed in green. Condensed Simon's commentary. One of all, least of all, is the victim predestined. Once by inadvertence, twice by design, he challenges his destiny. It comes when he is abandoned and challenges him reluctant and, as an apparition of hope and youth, holds him unresisting. It leads him to a strange habitation, to a secret infidel apartment, and there implacable immolates him, consenting. Why was the host, the victim, predestined? Sad. He wished that a tale of deed should be told of a deed not by him, should by him not be told. Why was the host reluctant, unresisting, still, in accordance with the law of the conservation of energy? Why was the host, secret infidel, silent? He weighed the possible evidences for and against ritual murder, and the incitations of the hierarchy, the superstition of the populace, the propagation of rumor and continued fraction of veridicity, the envy of opulence, the influence of retaliation, the sporadic reappearance of atavistic delinquency, the mitigating circumstances of fanaticism, hypnotic suggestion, and
Somnambulism.
What?
Somnambulism.
Somnambulism.
Sleepwalking.
Oh, sleepwalking. Okay. Okay, next.
From which, if any, of these mental or physical disorders was he not totally immune? From hypnotic suggestion. Once, waking, he had not recognized his sleeping apartment. More than once, waking, he had been for an indefinite time incapable of moving or uttering sounds. From somnambulism. Once, sleeping, his body had risen, crouched, and crawled in the direction of a heatless fire, and having attained its destination there, curled, unheated, in night attire, had lain sleeping. As this latter, or any cognate phenomena, declared itself in any member of his family. Twice. In Hollis Street and in Ontario Terrace, his daughter Millie, at the ages of 6 and 8 years, had uttered in sleep an exclamation of terror and had replied to the interrogations of two figures in night attire with a vacant, mute expression. What other infantile memories had he of her? 15th June, 1889. Querulous newborn female infant crying to cause and lessen congestion. A child named Padney Socks. She shook with shocks her money box, counted his 3 free money penny buttons, 1, 2, 3. A doll, a boy, a sailor she cast away, blonde, born of too dark. She had blonde ancestry, remote, a violation. Herr Hauptmann, Hanau, Austrian Army, Roxamet, a hallucination. Lieutenant Mulvey, British Navy. Next, please. Oh, let's see. What endemic characteristics were present? Conversely, the nasal and frontal formation was derived in a direct line of lineage, which, though interrupted, would continue at distant intervals to its most distant intervals. And then I think we will go with Katrina.
Okay. What memories had he of her adolescence? She relegated her hoop and skipping rope to a recess on the Duke's lawn. Entreated by an English visitor, she declined to permit him to make and take away her photographic image, objection not stated. On the South Circular Road, in the company of Elsa Potter, followed by an individual of sinister aspect, she went halfway down Stamer Street and turned abruptly back, reason of change not stated. On the vigil of the 15th anniversary of her birth, she wrote a letter from Mullingar, County Westmeath, making a brief allusion to a local student, faculty and year not stated. Did that first division, portending a second division, afflict him? Less than he had imagined, more than he had hoped. What second departure was contemporaneously perceived by him similarly, if differently? A temporary departure of his cat. Why similarly? Why differently? Similarly, because actuated by a secret purpose, the quest of a new male Mullingar student or of a healing herb, valerian. Differently, because of the different possible returns to the inhabitants or to the habitation. In other respects, were their differences similar? In passivity, in economy, in instinctive tradition, in unexpectedness. Next, please. Anne.
As. Inasmuch as leaning, she sustained her blonde hair for him to ribbon it for her. Safe neck arching cat. Moreover, on the free surface of the lake in Stephen's Green, amid inverted reflections of trees, her uncommented spit, describing concentric circles of water rings indicated by the constancy of its permanence, the locus of a somnolent prostate fish, mouse-watching cat. Again, in order to remember the date, combatants issue and consequences of a famous military engagement, she pulled a plait of her hair, ear-washing cat. Furthermore, silly Millie, she dreamed of having had an unspoken, unremembered conversation with a horse whose name had been Joseph, to whom, which she had offered a tumblerful of lemonade, which he had appeared to have accepted. Heart-dreaming cat, hence in passivity, in economy, in the instinct of tradition, in unexpectedness, their differences were similar. In what way had he utilized gifts? 1, an owl. 2, a clock, given as a matrimonial auguries to interest and to instructor. As object lessons to explain, 1, the nature and habits of the oviparous animals, the possibility of aerial flight, certain abnormalities of vision, the secular process of invalidation, the principle of the pendulum, 2, the principle of the pendulum, exemplified in Bob, wheel gear and regulator, the translation in terms of human or social regulation of the various positions clockwise of movable indicators on or non-moving dial, the exactitude of the recurrence per hour of an instant in each hour, when the longer and the shorter indicator were at the same angle of inclination. Vitalised, 5 and 11 minutes past each hour per hour in geometrical progression. In what manners did she reciprocate? She remembered on the 27th anniversary of his birth, she presented to him a breakfast moustache cup of imitation Crown Derby porcelain ware. She provided at quarter day or thereabouts if or when purchases had been made by him, not for her. She showed herself attentive to his necessities, anticipating his desires. She admired a national phenomenon having been explained by him, not for her. She expressed the immediate desire to possess, without gradual acquisition, a fraction of his science, the moiety, the quarter, a thousandth part. Next, please.
What proposal did Bloom, deambulist, father of Millie, somnambulist, make to Stephen, noctambulist, to pass in repose the hours intervening between Thursday, proper, and Friday, normal, on an extemporized cubicle in the apartment immediately above the kitchen and immediately adjacent to the sleeping apartment of his host and hostess? What various advantages would or might have resulted from a prolongation of such extemporization? For the guest, security of domicile and seclusion of study. For the host, rejuvenation of intelligence, vicarious satisfaction. For the hostess, disintegration of obsession, acquisition of correct Italian pronunciation. Why might these several provisional contingencies between a guest and a hostess not necessarily preclude or be precluded by a permanent eventuality of reconciliatory union between a schoolfellow and a Jew's daughter? Because the way to daughter led through mother, the way to mother through daughter. Next, please.
To what inconsequent polysyllabic question of his host did the guest return a monosyllabic negative answer? If he had known the late Mrs. Emily Sinico, accidentally killed at Sydney Parade Railway Station, 14 October 1903, what inchoate corollary statement was consequently suppressed by the host? A statement explanatory of his absence on the occasion of the interment of Mrs. Mary Dalis, born Goulding, 26 June 1903, vigil of the anniversary of the decease of Rudolph Bloom, born Virag. Was the proposal of asylum accepted? Promptly, inexplicably, with amicability, gratefully, it was declined. What exchange of money took place between host and guest? The former returned to the latter without interest a sum of money, £1.70, £1 7 shillings sterling, advanced by the latter to the former. What counter proposals were alternately advanced, accepted, modified, declined, restated in other terms, reaccepted, ratified, reconfirmed. To inaugurate a prearranged course of Italian instruction, place the residence of the instructed. To inaugurate a course of vocal instruction, place the residence of the instructress. To inaugurate a state of static, semi-static, and peripatetic intellectual dialogues, places the residence of both speakers, if both speakers were resident in the same place. The Ship Hotel and Tavern, 6 Lower Abbey Street, West and East Connery, proprietors. The National Library of Ireland, 10 Kildare Street. The National Maternity Hospital, 29, 30, and 31 Hollis Street, a public garden. The vicinity of a place of worship, a conjunction of 2 or more public thoroughfares. The point of bisection of a right line drawn between their residences if both speakers were resident in different places. What rendered problematic for Bloom the realization of these mutually self-excluding propositions? The irreparability of the past. Once, at a performance of Albert Hengler's Circus in the Rotunda, Rutland Square, Dublin, an intuitive party-colored clown in quest of paternity had penetrated from the ring to a place in the auditorium where Bloom, solitary, was seated, and had publicly declared to an exhilarated audience that he, Bloom, was his, the clown's, papa. The imprevedibility of the future. Once, in the summer of 1898, he, Bloom, had marked a florin with 3 notches on the milled edge and tendered it in payment of an account due to and received by J&T Davy, family grocers, 1 Charlotte Mall, Grand Canal, for circulation on the waters of civic finance for possible, circuitous, or direct return. Next.
Was the clown Bloom's son? No. Had Bloom's coin returned? Never. Why would a recurrent frustration the more depress him? Because at the critical turning point of human existence, he desired to amend many social conditions, the product of inequality and avarice and international animosity. He believed that human life was infinitely perfectible, eliminating these conditions. There remained the genetic conditions imposed by natural as distinct from human law as integral parts of the human whole. The necessity of destruction to procure elementary sustenance, the painful character of the ultimate functions of separate existence, agonies of birth and death, the monotonous menstruation of simian and partially human females extending from the age of puberty to the menopause, inevitable accidents at sea, in mines and factories, certain very painful maladies and their resultant surgical operations, innate lunacy and congenital criminality, disseminating epidemics, catastrophic cataclysms which make terror the basis of human mentality, seismic upheavals, the epicenters of which are located in densely populated regions, the fact of vital growth through convulsions of metamorphosis from infancy through maternity to maturity to decay. Why did he desist from speculation? Because it was a task for a superior intelligence to substitute other, more acceptable phenomena in place of the less acceptable phenomena to be removed. Next, please.
Did Stephen participate in his dejection? He affirmed his significance as conscious, rational animal proceeding syllogistically from the known to the unknown and a conscious, rational reagent between a micro and a microcosm, ineluctably constructed upon the incertitude of the void. Was this affirmation apprehended by Bloom? Not verbally, substantially. What comforted his misapprehension? That as a competent, keyless citizen, he had proceeded energetically from the unknown to the known through the incertitude of the void. In what order of precedence, with what attendant ceremony, was the exodus from the house of bondage to the wilderness of inhabitation effected? Lighted candle and stick borne by Bloom, diaconal hat on ash plant borne by Stephen, with what intonation secreto of what commemorative psalm? The 113th modus peregrinus in exitu Israel de Egypto domus Jacob de populo barbaro. What did each do at the door of egress? Bloom set the candlestick on the floor. Stephen put the hat on his head. For what creature was the door of egress a door of egress? For a cat. What spectacle confronted them when they, first the host, then the guest, emerged silently, doubly dark, from obscurity by a passage from the rear of the house into the penumbra of the garden? The heaven tree of stars hung with humid night blue fruit. Next.
With what meditations did Bloom accompany his demonstration to his companion of various constellations? Meditations of evolution increasingly vaster, of the moon visible in incipient lunation, approaching perigee, of the infinite latiginous, scintillating, uncondensed Milky Way, discernible by daylight by an observer placed at the lower end of a cylindrical vertical shaft 5,000 feet deep, sunk from the surface towards the center of the earth, of Sirius, Alpha in Canis Major, to 10 light years, 57, I don't know, billion, trillion miles, distant and in volume 900 times the dimension of our planet, of Arcturus, of the procession of the equinoxes of Orion with belt and septuple sun theta, and nebula in which 100 of our solar systems could be contained, of Morbidund and of nascent new stars such as Nova in 1901, of our system plunging towards the constellation of Hercules, of the parallax or the parallactic drift of the so-called fixed stars, in reality ever moving from immeasurably remote eons to infinitely remote futures, in comparison with which the years 70 of allotted human life formed a parenthesis of infinitesimal brevity. Katrina.
Were there averse meditations of involution increasingly less vast? Of the eons of geological periods recorded in the stratifications of the earth, of the myriad minute etymological organic existences concealed in cavities of the earth beneath removable stones, in hives and mounds, of microbes, germs, bacteria, bacilli, spermatozoa, of the incalculable millions of trillions of billions of millions of imperceptible molecules contained by cohesion of molecular affinity in a single pinhead, of the universe of human serum constellated with red and white bodies, themselves universes of void space constellated with other bodies, each in continuity, its universe of divisible component bodies, of which each was again divisible in divisions of redivisible component bodies, dividends and divisors ever diminishing without actual division till, if the progress were carried far enough, not nowhere, was never reached. Why did he not elaborate these calculations to a more precise result? Because some years previously, in 1886, when occupied with the problem of the quadrature of the circle, he had learned of the existence of a number computed to a relative degree of accuracy to be of such magnitude and of so many places, e.g., the ninth power of the ninth power of 9, that the result having been obtained, 33 closely printed volumes of 1,000 pages each, if innumerable quires and reams of India paper would have to be requisitioned in order to contain the complete tale of its printed integers of units, tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions, the nucleus of nebula, of every digit of every series containing succinctly the potentiality of being raised to the utmost kinetic elaboration of any power of any of its powers. Anne.
Thank you. Did he find the problem of the inhabitability of the planets and their satellites by a race given in species, and of the possible social and moral redemption of said race by the mere easier of solution, of a different order of difficulty? Conscious that the human organism, normally capable of sustaining an atmospheric pressure of 19 tons, when elevated to a considerable altitude in terrestrial atmosphere, suffered with a rhythmical progression of intensity, according as the line of demarcation between troposphere and stratosphere was approximated from nasal hemorrhage, impeded respiration and vertigo. When proposing this problem for solution, he had conjectured as a working hypothesis, which could not be proved impossible, that a more adaptable and differently anatomically constructed race of being might subsist otherwise under Martian, Mercurial, Venereal, Jovian, Saturnian, Neptunian, or Uranium sufficient and equivalent conditions through an apogee humanity of being created in varying forms, with finished differences, resulting similar to the whole and to one another, would probably there as here remain inalterably and inalienably attached to vanities of vanities, and all that is vanity. And the problem of possible redemption, the minor was proved by the major, which various features of the constellations were in turn considered. The various colors, significant of various degrees of vitality, white, yellow, crimson, vermilion, cinnabar, their degrees of brilliancy, their magnitudes revealed up to and including the seventh, their positions, the Magnus Star, the Walsingham Way, the Chariot of David, the annular secretures of Saturn, the condensation of spiral nebulae into suns, the interdependent gyrations of double suns, the independent sequence discoveries of Galileo, Simon Marius, Boccaccio, Leverrier, Herschel, Galli, the systemization attempted by Bode and Kepler of cubes of distances and squares of time of revolution, the almost infinite compressibility of Hirsute comets and their vast elliptical egressive and re-entrant orbits from perihelion to aphelion, the sidereal origin of meteoritic storms, the Libyan floods on Mars about the period of the birth of the younger astroscopic, the annual recurrence of meteoritic showers about the period of the feast of St. Lawrence, who was a martyr on 10th of August, the monthly recurrence known as the new moon with the old moon in her arms, the positioned influence of celestial on human bodies, the appearance of a star, first magnitude of Exerian brilliancy dominating by night and day, a new luminous sun generated by the collision and the amalgamation in consonance of two nocturnus exons, about the period of the birth of William Shakespeare over Delta in the recumbent never-setting constellation Cassiopeia, and of a star second magnitude of similar origin, but lesser brilliancy, which had appeared in and disappeared from the constellation of Corona Septentrionalis about the period of the birth of Leopold Bloom, and of the other stars of presumably similar origin, which had effectively or presumably appeared in and disappeared from the constellation of Andromeda about the period of the birth of Stephen Dedalus, and in and from the constellation of Rega some years after the birth and death of Rudolph Bloom Jr., and in and from under constellation some years before or after the birth or death of other persons, the attendance phenomena of eclipses, solar and lunar, from immersions to immersion, abatement of wind, transit of shadow, tachygenery of winged creatures, emergence of nocturnal or crepuscular animals, persistence of infernal light, obscurity of terrestrial waters, pallor of human beings.
Okay, so
Next,
let me
please.
let me
Oh,
interrupt.
sorry.
Okay. And
Of
I'm going
course.
to make you host. I have to go. My
No
grandson
problem.
has been trying to wish me happy birthday, and we've missed.
It's your birthday.
Happy
Actually,
Oh,
birthday
happy
yesterday
Day
was
to
yesterday.
you. Happy birthday.
birthday to you.
Happy
Okay.
Happy
birthday,
birthday,
dear
dear
Duncan.
Duncan.
Happy
Happy
birthday
Thank
birthday
you
to
very much.
you.
Anne is now
How
the
did we
host.
miss that? How did we miss that?
Yeah, I usually try to hide it. Anyway, I'm going to go and make a phone call
Have a lovely day
to my grandson.
and a lovely
I
birthday.
probably won't be back, but I may be back. In the
To your
meantime,
grandfather? This is your grandfather?
my
Wow.
grandson, my
Oh, your
grandson.
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 Well, my
Okay.
grandfather would be Methuselah himself. Okay,
Have a
thanks
lovely
lot.
day.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye, Duncan.
Bye.
Okay. So up to you, Orla.
His, Bloom's, logical conclusion, having weighed the matter and allowing for possible error, that it was not a heaven tree, not a heaven grot, not a heaven beast, not a heaven man, that it was a utopia, there being no known method from the known to the unknown, an infinity, renderable equally finite by the supposititious probable apposition of one or more bodies equally of the same and of different magnitudes, a mobility of illusory forms immobilized in space, remobilized in air, a past which possibly had ceased to exist as a present before its future spectators had entered actual present existence. Was he more convinced of the aesthetic value of the spectacle? Indubitably, in consequence of the reiterated examples of poets in the delirium of the frenzy of attachment, or in the abasement of rejection, invoking ardent sympathetic constellations, or the frigidity of the satellite of their planet. Did he then accept as an article of belief the theory of astrological influences upon sublunary disasters? It seemed to him as possible of proof as of confutation, and the nomenclature employed in its selenographical charts as attributable to verifiable intuition as to fallacious analogy, the lake of dreams, the sea of rains, the gulf of dews, the ocean of fecundity. Next, please.
What special affinities appear to him to exist between the moon and woman? Her antiquity in preceding and surviving successive Tellurian generations, her nocturnal predominance, her satellitic dependence, her luminary reflection, her constancy under all her phases, rising and setting by her appointed times, waxing and waning, the forced invariability of her aspect, her indeterminate response to inaffirmative interrogation, her potency over effluent and refluent waters, her power to enamor, to mortify, to invest with beauty, to render insane, to incite to and aid delinquency, the tranquil inscrutability of her visage, the terribility of her isolated, dominant, implacable, resplendent propinquity, her omens of tempest and of calm, the stimulation of her light, her motion and her presence, the admonition of her craters, her arid seas, her silence, her splendor when visible, her attraction when invisible. What visible luminous sign attracted Bloom's, who attracted Stephen's gaze? In the second story rear of his, Bloom's, house, the light of a paraffin oil lamp with oblique shade projected on a screen of roller blinds supplied by Frank O'Hara, window blind, curtain pole, and revolving shutter manufacturer, 16 Ongier Street. How did he elucidate the mystery of an invisible, attractive person? His wife, Marion Molly Bloom, denoted by a visible, splendid sign, a lamp, with indirect and direct verbal allusions or affirmations, with subdued affection and admiration, with description, with impediment, with suggestion. But then were silent. Both then were silent, each contemplating the other in both mirrors of the reciprocal flesh of their, his, no, not his, fellow faces. Were they indefinitely inactive? At Stephen's suggestion, at Bloom's instigation, both. First Stephen, then Bloom, in penumbra urinated, their sides contiguous, their organs of micturition reciprocally rendered invisible by manual circumposition, their gazes, first Bloom's, then Stephen's, elevated to the projected luminous and semi-luminous shadow. Next.
Similarly, the trajectories of their first sequent, the simultaneous urinations were dissimilar. Bloom's longer, less eruent, in the incomplete form of the bifurcated penultimate alphabetical letter, who, in his ultimate year at high school, 1880, had been capable of attaining the point of greatest altitude against the whole congruent strength of the institution, 210 scallops. Stevens, higher, more sibilant, who in the ultimate hours of the previous day had augmented by diuretic consumption and insistent vesical pressure. What different problems presented themselves to each concerning the invisible, audible, collateral organ of the other? To Bloom, the problem of irritability, tumescence, rigidity, reactivity, dimension, sanitariness, pelacity. To Stephen, the problem of the sacerdotal integrity of Jesus circumcised, 1st of January, holiday of obligation to hear Mass and abstain from unnecessary servile work, and the problem as to whether the divine prepuce, the carnal bridal ring of the Holy Roman Catholic Apostolic Church, conserved in Calcutta, were deserving of simple hyperduly or of the 4th degree of latria accorded to the abscisian of such divine excrescences as hair and toenails. What celestial sign was by both simultaneously observed? A star precipitated with great apparent velocity across the firmament from Vega in the Lyre above the zenith, above the star group of the Tress of Bernice, towards the zodiacal sign of Leo. How did the centripetal reminder afford egress to the centrifugal departure? By inserting the barrel of an carbureted male key in the hole of an unstable female lock, obtaining a purchase on the bow of the key and turning its wards from right to left, withdrawing a bolt from its staple, pulling inward spasmodically, an obsolescence unhinged door, and revealing an aperture for free egress and free ingress. How did they take one of the other in separation? Standing perpendicular at the same door and on different sides of its base, the lines of their valedictory arms meeting at any point and forming an angle less than the sum of two right angles. What sound accompanied the union of their tangent, the disunion of their respectively centrifugal and centripetal hands, the sound of the peal of the hour of the night by the chime of the bells in the church of St. George? What echoes of that sound were by both and each heard by Stephen? Lilata ritulatum turma circumdet in lub illatorium te virginum chorus expitat by Bloom. Hegibo, 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 Hegibo. Where were the several members of the company which with Bloom that day at the bidding of that peal had travelled from Sandymount in the south of Glasnevin in the north? Martin Cunningham in bed, Jack Power in bed, Simon Dedalus in bed, Tom Kiernan in bed, Ned Lambert in bed, Joe Hines in bed, John Henry Minton in bed, Bernard Corrigan in bed, Patsy Dignam in bed, Paddy Dignam in the grave. Alone, what did Bloom hear? The double reverberation of retreating feet on the heaven-born earth, the double vibration of a Jew's harp in the resonant lane. Alone, what did Bloom feel? The cold of interstellar space, thousands of degrees below freezing point, or the absolute zero of Fahrenheit, centigrade, or Raymore, the incipient intimations of proximate dawn. Of what did bell chime and hand touch and footstep and low chill remind him? Of companions now in various manners, in different places defunct. Percy Apjohn, killed in action, Mother River. Philip Gilligan, Pittis Jervis Hospital. Matthew F. Kane, accidental drowning, Dublin Bay. Philip Mussel, Hoima, Haytersbury Street. Michael Hart, Pittis Mater Misericordiae Hospital. Patrick Dignam, apoplexy, Sandymount. Next, please.
What prospect of what phenomenon inclined him to remain? The disparation of three final stars, the diffusion of daybreak, the apparition of a new solar disk. Had he ever been a spectator of those phenomena? Once, in 1887, after a protracted performance of charades in the house of Luke Doyle, Kimmage, he had awaited with patience the apparition of a diurnal phenomena seated on the wall, his gaze turned in the direction of Mizrach, the east. He remembered the initial phenomena with more active air and a matutinal distant cock, ecclesiastical clocks at various points, Alvine music, the isolated tread of an early wayfarer, the visible diffusion of the light of an invisible luminous body, the forced golden limb of the resurgent sun, perceptible low in the horizon. Did he remain? With deep inspiration he returned, retraversing the garden, re-entering the passage, reclosing the door. With brief suspiration he reassumed the candle, reascended the stairs, reapproached the door of the front room, hall floor, and re-entered. What suddenly arrested his ingress? The right temporal lobe of the hollow sphere of his cranium came into contact with a solid timber angle where an infinitesimal but sensible fraction of a second later, a painful sensation was located in consequence of antecedent sensations transmitted and registered. Describe the alterations effected in the disposition of the articles of furniture. A sofa upholstered with prune plush had been translocated from opposite the door to the Ingleside near the compactly unfurled Union Jack. An alteration which he had frequently intended to execute. The blue and white checker inlaid Malika top table had been placed opposite the door in the place vacated by the prune plush sofa. The walnut sideboard, a projecting angle of which had momentarily arrested his ingress, had been moved from its position beside the door to a more advantageous but a more perilous position in front of the door. Two chairs had been moved from right and left of the Ingleside to the position originally occupied by the blue and white checker inlaid majolicated top table. Next.
Will we keep going? We do one more round.
Okay.
I don't mind.
Mhm.
Yeah. What do you think?
Fine.
So it's just 8 minutes past 8 here.
How much, Anne? I can't see how much is left in the chapter.
A lot.
A lot. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe
Let's
we
go,
should talk
Katrina.
about it for a while and save it for next week, because I think there'll probably be a lot of people back next week. I think we're all, although we're coming
Okay.
to Christmas. So do you think we'll have it finished by Christmas?
What will we have? Will we have the whole thing finished?
Okay,
Is this-
give me page number so I can pass them on to Duncan. Moshe Kahole, which
in
is please in Irish.
611 Wordsworth, top of page.
Gabler
Perfect.
580.
And Lois, you and I are the same. I'm not at home yet. I'm home tomorrow.
Oh,
Yeah,
very
I think
good.
I'll be on that. Yeah, I'm in Rome.
Oh, in Rome. Okay. Okay. Have I any other editions? So Wordsworth 611, Gabler is 580. And 829. Penguin. Okie doke. Perfect. Oh, you're still on your thing.
I'm on my way home.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. No.
Does anybody understand this?
No.
No.
And I had a question. I mean, this is the second or third time I've been through the book with you guys. And what is the purpose of this episode? And clearly it's got some basis, some reference to something else, possibly in the original Odyssey. But it's an interrogation back and forth. It's almost like a catechism.
It was definitely a catechism. That was the idea of it.
Uh-huh.
That you knew the answer before you even had to ask the question. because that's what they would be waiting for. You just had to
Like
learn
this
them
is-
off.
Who made me? God made me, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
be honest with you,
It's
Lois, it's completely above my head. The only bit I understood was the bit where they appeared to be like gentlemen standing at the male urinal side by
Yeah.
side, like in a men's shed. Apparently, women, they communicate face to face, but the essence of the men's shed is men communicate better shoulder to shoulder. These two
Yeah.
gentlemen were urinating in tandem.
I
That's the
thought
only
it
bit
was-
I understood.
I thought it was Providence that of all of us who are still reading, the only male still reading with us got that section.
Yeah.
I'm glad, Lois, that you said that, because I thought, yeah, that vaguely remembered something about that. Was that what that was about, Jim?
Yes, it was.
Oh,
Mm.
God.
I like it. I don't understand it, but I like the sound of it and I like the rhythm of
I
it.
do too.
And maybe it is that catechism call and response kind of feeling to it, but I like the sound of it.
I do too. I like the rhythm. It's kind of one of my, even though I don't understand it, it's kind of one of my favorite ones. Yeah.
And
You see,
we need somebody to see what the parallels were here with the Aeneid. You know that Joe usually parallels
oh yeah, it's
us.
great. Hmm.
Well, Anne, you can tell us the parallels with Dante.
No, there is a parallel. When he hits his head off the furniture when he goes back into the room, that is definitely from the Odyssey. That there is something about that gets hit on the head. So, but of all the furniture moved around, I laughed because like when all the furniture is moved around in the front room, it was something that Bloom had planned to do. When he was ever going to do it, nobody knew. Because when he went out the garden, he was going to plant mint and flowers, and he never gets around to doing any of the jobs. You know.
So
it's
if
kind
in
of-
fact there really was a rearrangement of the furniture, do we think that Molly rearranged the furniture in his absence?
Yes, with Boylan.
Boiling.
They both did.
Okay.
So Boylan is the man of action.
Yes, that's a good point, Ola. Yes.
Well, he's definitely got some sort of action, or he's in bed with what do you call her, Molly, anyway.
Yep. Just it's different. It's completely different.
The bit I don't understand, or I was thinking about, was on page 595 of Wordsworth, when he says, "What were Stephen's and Bloom's quasi-simultaneous volitional quasi-sensations of concealed identities?" And they say auditively, Bloom's, the traditional accent of the ecstasy of catastrophe. So listening to Bloom, you hear someone who's in ecstasy of catastrophic ecstasy. Because he's talking, is Bloom concealing the fact that he's in misery?
I'm trying to find it.
It's page 595 in Wordsworth. And the other, I haven't looked up who the other people are for who Stephen looks like,
That's what I was just going to say, Orla. If we knew who those people were, we might get some further insight.
Yeah.
Okay, whoops. Well, then I'm going to look it up for next week, because I have some reference books.
So what are we to make of the song that Stephen chooses to sing?
Yeah.
Where's
Why
Bill
did
Kay?
you choose that song?
That's on page 566 of the Gabler.
And 596 of Wordsworth.
Seems very off-putting to his host.
Yeah. There has to be a reason why it was chosen.
Well, the question is, did the host encourage his guest to chant in a modulated voice a strange legend on an allied theme? What's the theme? That's on page 565 of Gabler, before the poem is listed.
Oh.
What future careers had been possible for Bloom in the past, and with what exemplars? And we have that whole list. Then we have, did the host encourage his guests, blah, blah, blah. Recite the first major part of this chanted legend. We finished.
Well, I read it about being a Jew in the early 20th century, before all the really bad stuff happening, but having had centuries of really bad stuff happening. And as an Irish person, in the Irish context, many of those people would have joined the rebellion. No, we wouldn't call it the rebellion, but 1960. So in 1903, what he is saying is that by becoming Irish, these people, you won't mess with them. But I'm saying this in the light of what's happening at the moment, because in the world, it's like, don't mess, people in the world are saying, don't mess with me. Because you read it and it's like excessive violence for no reason, but you're talking about centuries of the song, but you're talking about millennia of being an oppressed people.
There is a version of this that's an American folk song from the Appalachian area, and I could hear the melody to that as I was reading this, and it's about a woman who's killing her lover instead of the Jew's daughter killing the kid. It's the exact same rhythm. In fact, I think about your lily white whatever, that line is in the folk one that's in the Appalachians. Yeah, she took him by the lily white hand.
Maybe it's an American song that's been rejigged.
I don't know.
Maybe so.
That Appalachian area in the States was settled by Irish and Scottish.
Okay. An allied team would suggest that they were on the same side, wouldn't it? They were allies. And then he says, how did the son of Rudolph receive the first part? With unmixed feelings, where he wasn't upset, smiling, a Jew. He heard with pleasure and saw the unbroken kitchen window. How did the father of Millicent receive the second part? With mixed feelings, unsmiling, he heard and saw with wonder a Jew's daughter all dressed in green. Don't know. There's some significance there? Okay, and why was the host silent? He weighed the possible evidence for and against ritual murder. Maybe that? The incitation of heresy and superstition of the populace, rumor. Gosh.
Well, I would think 597, how did the father of Millicent receive the second part? It's like he's understood that his daughter is not going to be like the people of the past. His daughter is Irish and is would stand up for herself.
Really?
She's not going to take the role of an oppressed victim. And he's not impressed with mixed feelings, because that's maybe not what he would want for his daughter. You know, the way people think in their what they do isn't what they want for their people, for their family. And so we all make mistakes in our lives, and then you grow up and you're looking at younger people going, don't do that, don't drink, and you've been drunk when you were young, sort of stuff.
Yeah, and so the
I'm just
cycle
guessing.
continues.
Pardon? I didn't understand what you said, Jane.
I just said, and so the cycle continues.
Mm. Yeah. I haven't actually come across any explanation of this.
Unless he's talking about Stephen, and Stephen has changed throughout the evening. So Stephen, because Stephen has listened to everything, has talked about everything, and he sees himself as the sort of paternalistic way towards Stephen. And so he sees that Stephen is changing through the book. So, you know, Stephen runs away from Buck Mulligan and all of those. He can't go back. And he's going to, we know that he's not going to stay with them. He's going to go and stay in Sheriff Street or somewhere with the Maggies. I mean, he doesn't know that yet, but he's looking at Stephen and wondering.
It's still surprising that Stephen would behave like that. Like when we know him as we do, because you know he's not in neutral ground. He's in Bloom's house, so Bloom is his host. So we would imagine that he would be more respectful. You know, even if he was in the hospital or somewhere where they were boisterous and all that, and all the boys, you'd say, okay, he'd do it to fit in, but he wasn't. It was just two people together.
Well, you know the way he Bloom smiles because he sees the unbroken window, because no one has attacked them. And then later, you know, no one's going to attack them, but he understands that if anybody was going to attack them, Stephen would defend. His you know, Stephen will stand his ground, and he will defend he'll get them back if they take his football, or if they kick a football through his window, or whatever is the thing. And that's why he's unsmiling, because he's understood that Stephen has changed because of, I mean, I've probably missed half of what was being said because I was focusing on stars and thinking about magi and all sorts of things like that. But
on page 595, just there, the line above the last paragraph, he says, did the host encourage his guest to chant in a modulated voice a strange legend on an allied theme? Sometimes I think there's a kind of a Jewish sense of humor where they tell jokes against themselves. As my brother, he has two friends who are Jewish, and they tend to tell jokes like that.
Mhm. And what does this one mean just after this? Why was the host, in brackets, victim predestined, goes back sad? He wished that a tale of a deed should be told of a deed, not by him, should by him not be told. The tale of a deed should be told. I definitely have to do a bit of homework on this.
Mm. Well, Stephen was still hungover, maybe tired, hungry, a little irresponsible.
Tale of a deed. Which is a tale of a deed.
Or maybe even to some extent pushing Bloom away because he's not close to anybody. And it's hard to let people be nice to him. He has a hard time letting people be nice to him.
That's true.
The rhythm of that sentence, he wished that a tale of a deed should be told of a deed not by. It's reminiscent of something, and I can't place it.
Oh.
The rhythm of that is somewhere in my head.
Yeah, it's definitely important. Where am I? Here we go.
I'll see if I can conjure it up before next week.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much in this. There has to be a reason why this hymn was, why it was put in here.
So predestination is when it's not that Stephen changed, it's that it was his future. He sees Stephen's future as it's going to unfold by looking at him, and he's listening to Stephen, and Stephen is on a downward spiral. No?
I don't know, Orla.
And again, the victim predestined, that's the host, right? The host, which is Bloom. Is he the victim who is predestined to be the victim?
Yeah.
And then the host, reluctant, unresistant. Isn't that an oxymoron? Can you be reluctant and unresisting at the same time?
Well, he talks about passivity a lot. It's like passive, where I'll find it. Because what's interesting is you said, Jim, when they're hearing the peal of the hour at the Church of St. George, and they're both on different tracks, because Stephen hears some sort of Latin and Bloom hears hey ho, hey ho. And I remember when we read this last time, I thought it was like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Go, hey ho, we're off to work we go. But I don't know if that was round then. Maybe Stephen's going to become a priest. Maybe the future predestined.
And yeah, interesting, because we don't know what happens. Yeah.
Hey ho, hey ho.
Hi ho, hi ho.
Oh, I think on that note,
Yep.
I'm going to leave.
Okay, all right. So, ladies,
Thanks,
it's been a
everyone.
pleasure.
See you next week.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. See you next week,
Okay.
folks. Bye-bye.
Okay, good night.
Good night,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye-bye. Can you finish it? Okay. Just us. Have a good week.
You too. Bye-bye.